Welcome back to CFO Weekly, where we're talking with financial leaders about how to build efficiency in their teams, create time for strategy, and ultimately get results. With your host, Megan Weiss. Let's jump right in.
Today, my guest is Coulson Painter, controller for Caliber Companies. Caliber is an integrated group of companies in the real estate and private equity industry. Formed in 2009 and headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona, with an investment focus in the greater Southwest growth markets, Caliber leads the market in providing individual accredited investors and registered investment advisors with well-structured alternatives to traditional investments. Coulson began his career with Caliber more than 3 years ago as their director of tax, but was recently promoted to a position as vice president and corporate controller. He began his career with Deloitte, where he spent 5.5 years working his way up from tax consultant to tax manager. Coulson earned his master's in accountancy and a BS focused in accountancy with emphasis in tax from Brigham Young University. Coulson has been happily married to his wife, Lisa, for 4 years. Together, they are raising 4 daughters. Hello, Coulson, and thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to join you on the podcast.
Yeah, today we'll be talking about your background, your experience as a controller, and a bit about your organization and some of the unique challenges it's dealt with, as well as some of the solutions to those challenges you've implemented recently. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, so let's get started.
That sounds good.
First, start by telling me about your career progression, exactly how you got to where you are today.
Good question. So it really goes back to when I started my studies in accounting. I was at Brigham Young University in Utah, and I took general accounting classes. I took some tax classes, took some audit and financial reporting classes, and or financial accounting classes, I should say. Really enjoyed all of it, and a lot of interesting stuff. And I had a decision to make of what direction I wanted to take my career. I ultimately wanted to focus on tax, and I became a tax professional, did a master's degree in tax, and that led to a career in tax in Phoenix with Deloitte. Was there for 5 years and left Deloitte to join my current organization, Caliber, as a director of tax. And all throughout all of that career progression, I had in the back of my mind, I really think it would be cool to be a controller, really be cool to be on, in a financial decision-making position for a business or organization. And ultimately, I'd expressed that interest to our current CFO at my company. And, 3 years into the job here, an opportunity opened up for the controller position. And it really wasn't something that I was aware of or specifically planning on. I just, had that in the back of my mind that that's something I wanted to do. And the opportunity presented itself, and I jumped on it. I decided to, take a dive in career change within the company. And 5 months later, here we are. So it's been exciting and challenging, but I am grateful for all the different experiences and opportunities that I've had that have led me to here.
Yeah, well, congratulations on your latest role.
Thank you.
So are there any particular stories or moves that stand out as turning points throughout your career?
Yeah, a couple. As I think about this, one in particular was while I was at Deloitte, I had the opportunity to do a rotation kind of as an in-house loan staff, as it's called, for a large private equity company, and basically spent a tax season there reviewing tax returns, and was kind of immersed into this private equity world. And it was very different from what I was used to, but it kind of it was good to see how things worked on the other side, and having been in an accounting firm environment and having worked on tax returns for clients, mostly for medium-sized private businesses and their individual owners. That was kind of eye-opening, and seeing, wow, there's a lot more out there, and it is complex and interesting and fast-paced. And so I learned a lot, and that was a really great experience. Lasted about 3 months and went back and continued my career there, kind of back on the normal path. Ultimately, I considered leaving Deloitte for that specific company and decided not to, but that was something that I think prepared me down the road for where I am today. The other one was when I reached the turning point of deciding whether or not I wanted to continue in public accounting or branch off into industry. And that was a tough choice. I really did enjoy my time at Deloitte. I enjoyed the challenges and the learning experiences and, all the support and everything that entailed. And Deloitte is a great organization, but I was at a turning point, personally, my life at a turning point where we just had our third child and I was busier than ever. And, it seemed like, I needed to do something a little different. And I also saw I was at a point where, as I said, I was focused on private clients and individual tax and some things like that, gift tax, estate tax, things that were very specialized in the tax world. And honestly, there's not a lot of jobs outside of working at an accounting firm that if you focus on gift and estate and trust tax work. And I decided if I didn't want to do that, I needed to find a different career path. And I found Caliber through a LinkedIn job posting, and it was an opportunity to become a tax director. It was a new position for a new, quickly growing company, and I interviewed with them, and it just felt right, and I jumped on it. And like I said, spent 3 years in that position as tax director, and just recently transitioned 5 months ago to controller. So those are the two really big pivotal points in my career, and I really think that, among many others, things have worked out well as I, took those opportunities as they presented themselves.
Yeah, I started my career at Deloitte too, and wonderful place to work, but not a very easy lifestyle. So your background is unique for a controller, having specialized in tax at the start of your career. How do you think that background has benefited you as a controller, and what challenges does it present?
Yeah, good question. So as far as the benefits of being from a tax background, I think, and it goes back to some of the things I said with one, having, several different clients in small, mid-size, a handful of large companies. You have to juggle a lot of different things going on. You have to understand how different businesses work and all the moving parts there. And really, you have to be able to pivot from one thing to another and back and forth. And having done that really, worked on clients that had, multiple businesses and, lots of inner company transactions and things like that. Keeping everything straight, that was just kind of the background. And so in a way, when I transitioned to Caliber, I viewed it as just having one client, and my job was just to learn everything I could about each individual business, each individual transaction, each, all the going-ons at everything that was going on at all of those different businesses and the different firms and properties that were invested in. And that was, it actually was natural. And so as I transitioned, I really got to know every single aspect of every single business from a tax standpoint and had a good overall understanding of all of that, as opposed to being specialized in, a specific part of the business, whether the corporate side of Caliber or the hospitality side or different real estate, specific businesses that we have. I had a good broad overall understanding, and that really, lent itself to transitioning into the controller role. In addition to that, I had lots of interactions with investors, lots of interactions with different departments within the company. And so I think that lent itself well to transitioning from tax to leading the accounting team as the controller. Biggest challenges, I think, probably are obvious, but some of the obvious tax technical background that I have doesn't necessarily lend itself to the GAAP and financial accounting rules that that we need to follow on the accounting side. And so it's been, while I have a good background just from my college courses and being a CPA and all that comes with that and understanding financial accounting, not having applied it for many years as an auditor or as an accountant for the company, managing books and so on and so forth, I've had to learn and pivot there. And I really think fortunately, it's a good position where I have resources within the company, people who have that experience, that were experienced auditors, et cetera, to support me. Our CFO is a great resource. We have a director of financial reporting and technical accounting who is really helpful. So while I am still learning and developing and growing, and I think it'll be many years before I really feel comfortable in a lot of things, in the midst of our first, my first round of audits as controller. And so I'm just beginning to learn a lot. And so that's challenging.
I'm sure an audit is trial by fire. It always helps to have a great team surrounding you.
Yes, absolutely.
So as a relatively new controller, what advice would you give someone who's going into the role for the first time?
Good question. I think that, just coming at it with an open mind, a desire to learn, a desire to admit mistakes. I make mistakes, and, especially like I said, not having all the background, not knowing what to do, admitting not only mistakes, but, recognizing, there are certain things you don't know. I don't know all the things I don't know even, but just being willing to learn from those mistakes, learn from others, being teachable, and trying to learn as much as possible. I think all of that is quite helpful. It's hard, but I think sometimes you have to break it down, take things one day at a time, 1 week at a time, realize that it's going to get easier, and you're going to learn each day, each week. And honestly, it's not nearly as stressful as it was, my first week flying solo, although surprises always pop up and things happen that you don't see coming. So it's a lot to learn.
Yeah, that's great advice. And new roles are always hard, but they do get easier. So let's pivot a bit and talk about Caliber. Can you tell us a little bit about what they do?
Sure. So Caliber is a real estate private equity fund asset manager. We are not industry specific. So we are a fund manager. We partner with accredited investors. So that's investors who have a net worth of at least $1 million in investable wealth, or an income ranging from $200,000 to $300,000 per year. So it's typically sophisticated investors for the most part, although those rules are changing and kind of opening up to more people who are experts in certain fields. But we partner with those individual investors, and for the most part, they supply capital, and we supply some capital and our expertise into acquiring real estate assets, whether it be a hotel, an apartment complex, some kind of commercial property, really any type of real estate where we see an opportunity, and we invest in those real estate assets, and then work with our internal team, with our various real estate experts, as well as with different third-party experts and managers to optimize those properties. And ultimately, when the properties have been optimized and are operating at a high occupancy rate or at an optimal level, we will turn around and sell those businesses to an interested buyer. And that's kind of our business model. We have a pretty heavy portfolio of hotels. We also own some multifamily apartment complexes, other residential investments, including a fund that's focused on single family. We have commercial funds, and invested in office, invested in self-storage. We have a fund that is debt specific that lends to other real estate investments on a short to medium term basis. And we have a fund that's specialized in opportunity zones as well, and it's a qualified opportunity fund that invests specifically in certain opportunity zones throughout the Southwest. I should mention that we are based in Scottsdale, Arizona, and our specific regional focus is on the Southwest. That's Texas, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, primarily. So for the most part, right now we're in Arizona, but looking to expand. We have a development up in Colorado that outside of Denver that is master planned development, commercial, residential, et cetera. And that one is really, really hot right now with all that's happened, recently in Denver, not to mention with the influx of people, I think, outside of certain areas and looking for, a little more space. And so that's been exciting for us to have some growth in the Colorado market outside of our base here in Arizona.
Sounds like a very interesting business and an interesting place to work.
It is, yeah.
So the last 12 months have been challenging for everybody, but what have been Caliber's biggest challenges?
I think the one that is probably not unique to us, but something that everybody dealt with was just quickly transitioning to a fully remote work environment. I have to hand it to our team. We made a quick decision. I remember it was March 16th was the date the last day when everybody was in the office, and that's when the decision was made. We're going to go remote. Fortunately, we had a lot of things in place, a lot of tools and IT things in place that allowed us to do that kind of seamlessly. I mean, it wasn't seamlessly, but as seamlessly as could be expected for a company that prior to COVID was, I'd say pretty much everybody was in the office almost every day, working normal office hours. There wasn't a lot of, while there was some flexibility, there wasn't a lot of, weren't a lot of people who worked mostly at home. There were a few people who worked out of state, but we really had to transition and using things like Office 365 and Microsoft Teams and tools like that, things that we'd never used before. And all of a sudden, I said March 16th was the last day in the office. March 17th, all of a sudden I'm having video calls with people. And that was kind of weird at first, but it quickly became the everyday of, having meetings on Teams and weekly company calls just to kind of keep everybody on the same page and let everybody know what's going on so we didn't feel isolated. Fortunately, we have opened the office back up. And although it's still, most people are still in a remote work environment, it allows, there's flexibility to allow people to come into the office and with safe precautions. And we've been able to do that. And so I personally spend about 3 days a week in the office, 2 days working from home. And that's a good mix for me. And I think, that's something that post-COVID, we will, continue to have some flexibility. So, that's one thing. Industry specific, as I mentioned, we're in real estate. We don't have a lot of investments in office buildings, although we do have one in particular, and that is a challenging market right now to try leasing office space, although, some areas are better than others, and a lot of people are moving to Phoenix. So we'll see what happens there. The hospitality space, as I mentioned, that has been challenging. We own several hotels, and that is, the hardest part right now. Being in Arizona this time of year, from about January through April, is our busy time. So last year we had a normal January, February, and first part of March where all of a sudden things changed. And so the market is very challenging and difficult there. And we've had to, get creative, and, things like the Paycheck Protection Program loans and things of that nature have been vital in helping our hotels continue to operate. And fortunately, we've been able to do that. And we transitioned to a national brand, Highgate, as our hotel manager, right? Just coincidentally, right before all the COVID stuff happened. So I think that has been instrumental as well in facing that challenge, but that's been hard. And then the other aspect that I think has been a challenge that we have been able to overcome was just as a private equity firm, one of our lifeblood is raising capital, raising money from investors. And with the uncertainty that COVID presented in March and around that time in 2020, people didn't want to invest. They wanted to hold on to their money and see how things were going to play out. So there was several months where we just had to, reassure the current investors and just wait for investors to become more comfortable. Unfortunately, between the certainty that several months of COVID has provided with understanding better, how it transmits, understand what precautions you can take, et cetera. The vaccine, I think, is crucial in reassuring investors that this isn't going to go on forever and we can return to normal. The certainty from the presidential election also has allowed investors to become more confident in investing again. And we, from November through now, we've seen, quite a big uptick in investment into our funds as well as into our company specifically. So it's been kind of a crazy last year, but those are some challenges that we were facing. Some we've overcome, some we're still dealing with, and we'll see how it goes.
I'm hopeful that the hospitality industry will be turning around soon because I definitely miss traveling.
Yeah, and I will say that while the hotels are still, I think it's pretty slow during the week, business travel is still pretty minimal. I think we have seen an uptick in just the pent-up demand. I think of people probably wanting to get out of town, and Arizona is a good place right now from all the people, all cold places throughout the country. And so our weekend business has picked up quite a bit from what I'm told. So that is one bright spot for sure.
Definitely. Okay, so let's talk specifically about qualified opportunity zone funds, which is something that you deal with. What exactly is this?
Yeah, so the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 was President Trump's tax plan that was passed into legislation at the end of 2017. And within it included some provisions for opportunity zones. Opportunity zones are a bipartisan idea. Both Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate were in support of it because it allows certain benefits to investors for investing in specific areas that are, for the most part, lower income areas. They have to be below a certain poverty level, and it's measured on a census tract basis. So the law was passed in 2017. I, at the time was specialized in tax, so I was keenly aware of the law and the provisions, although this, for a couple of months, I think was not the focus of almost anybody. And then we started hearing about it, and we realized this is something that Caliber already does. We go in certain areas where it might be an up-and-coming area or a lower income area where there is an opportunity to turn things around with an apartment complex or another investment, a hotel or what have you. And so it really meshed well with what Caliber already does and had been doing for 10 years at the time. And so we started our fund under the rules. And the biggest thing is that investing in a qualified opportunity fund for investors allows them to defer capital gains until at least 2026. So it started in 2018. You could defer your capital gains until the end of 2026. So that was almost 9 years at the time. And basically, investors can defer their capital gains They get a partial step up in basis, which is essentially equates to a discount on the amount of capital gains tax they'll have to pay at 2026. And then the biggest thing is that the appreciation of the investment within a 10-year period, if it's held for 10 years, is going to be tax-free. So there's that tax-free growth. That's something that really, incentivizes investors. Not only that, but it is an opportunity to invest in areas that really need investment. And so it aligns, the needs of communities and cities throughout the country with these opportunity zones that have been identified, and investors who have capital that may be sitting on the sidelines to recognize some gains and invest those gains into opportunity zones and really, start to turn those areas around. So it's something that's exciting, that's happening, and we're really excited to be part of it. Our fund is called the Caliber Tax Advantage Opportunity Zone Fund, LP. It started in 2018, like I said. It's been around for about 2.5 years now. And to date, we've raised $75 million and been deploying it in several different projects within the opportunity zones. We have a hotel in Tucson that is connected to the convention center in Tucson, Arizona, I should say. We have some historic buildings in downtown Mesa that we're looking to renovate and help revitalize the downtown area in Mesa, Arizona. Some residential development in Tempe, Arizona, and one very interesting project that we just finished and that is fully operational now was we took a building that I believe had been a nursing home or some other senior living facility. It was kind of run down in Phoenix, Central Phoenix, and we turned that into a behavioral health hospital, and that's been operating. So, I mean, that's something that not only, provides jobs for the community, but also is providing services. And, behavioral health is a huge focus area now more than ever. And that expanding capabilities and opportunities there is, I think, really important. And that's something that we have been able to partner with a medical group and bring to pass. So something we're excited about.
Yeah, those sound like a win for investors and a win for communities.
Exactly, and that's the idea. And it really just trying to make sure that those two things are aligned. It can be tricky, but it really does actually, if you have good projects that are projects that really fit the spirit of the law and aren't just, trying to squeeze something else into that, it really does incentivize investors and, investors looking for that ESG, the economic, social, government aspect of investing, having good impact, governance, I should say, having good impact in those areas is important. So we've focused on that. We are teaming with somebody to measure that impact on the community. We expect that, and it's been in talks for a long time, that there will be some legislation that requires these businesses to kind of be transparent about what the impact is. And proactively, we've decided to measure that and report on that to our investors and other, potential investors, so that they can see this is, these are the jobs created, this is the impact that it's having from a dollar standpoint.
So what unique challenges do qualified opportunity zone funds present when structuring real estate investments from an accounting standpoint?
I think I say this coming from a tax background, but tax usually isn't the tail wagging the dog, so to speak. But in some regards, with opportunity zones, a lot of tax rules and regulations and things like that are come into play here. It's not as simple as just setting up a fund and saying, oh yeah, we're operating in this area and it's an opportunity zone, so we're good. You have to meet a lot of different requirements. So there's a lot of measurement, a lot of tracking, and talking to legal counsel, a lot of talking to our tax advisors and making sure that things are structured, especially with the rules being new. And the law was passed just over 3 years ago. It took about another 2 years for the regulations associated with the law to be finalized. And that was something that, left people uncertain with how to treat things. So So we had to be flexible and learn as we went. But having the infrastructure that we already had, I was already in place as a full-time tax director. That made it unique for Caliber, as opposed to other people who set up opportunity funds and then realize they don't know what they're doing, and sometimes they have to wind them down or things like that. So it is complicated, and it's not just something that anybody can do, but you have to have a very tax specific focus on the fund that you may not have. The location is important, obviously, but also the type of business. There's certain restrictions on things the businesses can't do, certain things like that we have to keep in mind. And we're constantly learning things and having to change the way we do things a little bit. And there's a specific focus for those businesses versus any of our other general funds. And so we do our best to operate within the rules, and we do a pretty good job of doing that with the advisors we have. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of focus and a lot of monthly analysis to make sure we're still on track and still within those rules. So having a dedicated director of tax now, that's no longer me. We still have a really good person there in that chair to make sure things are in line and in track, and kind of alert us to areas that we need to be focused on from a investing and decision-making standpoint.
And Caliber recently undertook a registration A+ offering. This is foreign to me. So can you explain what this is and how Caliber decided it was the right thing for them?
Yeah, I mentioned, so we did a Regulation A+ offering. In fact, I should say that it closed on Friday, so the 26th of February was the close of that. It was successful.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was open for, I think it opened since April of last year, so open for about 8 or 9 months, and we really had a huge kind of final push there. I think we raised between $7 and $8 million in the last month of the capital raise, which was pretty exciting to us.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, Regulation A+, it allows small to medium-sized businesses, I think, in looking to raise in the range of $50 to $75 million maximum. I think it used to be 50, now it's 75 million is the maximum amount of capital you can raise in this type of offering through, a public offering. It requires, filings with the SEC and things of that nature, but it's kind of light compared to the typical public company filings in the sense that you don't have to do quarterly filings with the SEC. You file an annual filing and due by April 30th for us as a calendar year-end company. So you have a little bit more time to get that filing in a larger public company. And then we do a June 30th year-end filing as well under that. And it really just was a way for us to, open up the investor pool to a lot of people that know us and have been following us and have been connected with us, whether they are, vendors or contractors or people like that have done construction on Caliber jobs and things of that nature. And they just haven't fit into that, what I mentioned earlier, the accredited investor box of $1 million net worth or $200,000 to $300,000 a year in annual income, but they still might be sophisticated investors. They might be real estate professionals or things like that, and recognize Caliber's strategy and want to invest in it and do so. And so we basically, like investing in any public company, anybody can do that. And so it really opened it up to a wider range of investors. And there was a $2,000 minimum and a certain maximum that people couldn't invest beyond a certain amount of their net worth, and that was about it. But it really opened things up and really set us up. We've been pretty public, and it's no secret that the eventual plan is for us to become a fully public company at some point in the future, publicly traded on New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ or something like that. So that's nothing new and nothing that hasn't been said in the many webinars and things like that we've had over our CEO and others have had over the last month, especially as we've kind of made the final push for the capital raise. But something that was in the works for a long time. It was in the works when I started at Caliber over 3 years ago, and it takes a lot of getting the books and financial records in a position. And we had to catch up on audits and things like that, and get all our audits done and file with the SEC and respond to comments. And that took a lot of time and effort and investment, but we just viewed it as the next step to create wealth for the private individuals who had already invested in our company, as well as for the employees of Caliber and others who were interested in investing in Caliber. And so that was just kind of the logical next step in the plan that our company founders had.
Thanks for correcting me. Regulation A, not registration A.
Yeah, no worries.
And also with all of the socially impactful things that Caliber is doing, I'm sure people want to invest in things like that.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest surprise you've had in the last few months, and why?
I think, being in a leadership role, and I will say, having transitioned from being on the tax side of the business, where it was at first just me and then me and one other person, to moving on to the accounting side, where it's a larger team and dealing with a lot more people within and without the organization. People surprise you, whether it's good or bad. You have to be able to deal with surprises, be able to deal with unexpected news, whether it's somebody, accepting a job offer and then, the week before backing out, and then, all right, now we have to go back to the drawing board, or, a contractor not, showing up to get a job done that, a project done that was time sensitive and something that you planned on doing, things of that nature that, we have to deal with. And it's tricky sometimes, but you have to be flexible. You have to have a good attitude. And a lot of times I realize, when I receive that bad news, whatever it is, not to respond right that minute, but, take a breath and let it process, and, maybe come back to it in half an hour or an hour. And when that's not always possible, but to the extent that it is, something that, a bad news in an email, or, a problem that I have to, kind of help solve becomes my problem. I think it really is just being patient and trying to find a way to address those surprises. But, people are unpredictable, and it happens in good ways too. You hire somebody and they do a much better job than you expect. And I've had that as well. So, it's not all bad, but one way or the other, you don't know what people are going to do, and you just have to kind of roll with it. And I don't know. I think that's advice that's probably applicable to anybody, and whether it's you, Megan, or anybody else in whatever position you deal with people, and I think you just have to learn to be patient with them, and at the end of the day, recognize that there's a lot going on beneath the surface, and ultimately we can deal with it.
Yeah, it's so true. Especially these days, you don't know what people are struggling with, and the only actions you can control are your own.
True. Very true.
So despite a light at the end of the tunnel, 2021 is still off to a somewhat rocky start. So how do you inspire your team and keep them motivated through tough times?
I think, it kind of goes back to what I was saying on the last question, but I think, I do my best to try and relate to them. I will say, I'm not naturally an extroverted person. That might not be unique to me as an accountant, or to many of the listeners of your podcast as accounting finance professionals. But many of us might not be extroverted by nature. But I try to relate to them. Try to stay positive. Try to keep things light, within reason, and joke a little bit, even in facing those road bumps and problems that come up. I think, just finding ways to work together to find a solution, talking through things, checking in with them, making sure that, everything's okay on a personal level. A lot of times it's just listening, just letting them say what they have to say. And sometimes that's therapeutic in and of itself. And so I try to not jump to conclusions. I've learned that sometimes the best thing is to listen before, trying to provide advice. But just all those things hopefully help. I don't know. I guess we'll see, but I think that is, a key there.
Yeah, I think most people just want to be heard. So listening is always an important skill. And we touched on this a bit, but we touched on this a bit in that, the teams that you surround yourself are very important. So what are the traits that you look for when you're hiring a new employee?
Among other things, I think somebody who's dependable, somebody who's, you can really count on when problem comes up, that they can, take care of it, or at least, try and do their best, that, they have accountability to you and they keep you accountable as well. I think that's huge. Loyalty to the team, to the organization, being transparent, being respectful. I mean, that's important. I like to look for people who are problem solvers, and, as I've had the chance to, review a lot of resumes and interview a lot of people and in the last several months, I think that's important, talking to people and recognizing, they're problem solvers. They are, aspiring to advance in their career and aspiring to, take advantage of the opportunities that they're given and to learn and grow. People who are intelligent but also hardworking. It's a lot of different things. It's hard to say, and I don't know. I guess time will tell how that works out, as I'm still relatively new in the process. But I think those are all key important things.
I always like to ask this question, but are there any tools or technologies that you've implemented at Caliber recently that are helping the organization to become more efficient?
Yeah, we have. Right before I transitioned into the controller role, we switched our ERP system from QuickBooks to Sage Intacct, and that has been hugely impactful. QuickBooks was, I think, something that we had just started with as we were a small business, and quickly, we have had exponential growth over the last several years, and it became apparent a few years ago that QuickBooks, no longer met our needs when we had 30 sets of books and things like that. And then, fortunately, this was another fortuitous thing that was already in the works pre-COVID, but we had already engaged to switch to Sage Intacct, which is a much more robust software that is for bigger businesses and lots of different companies, and allows for intercompany transactions, and it's cloud-based, among other things. And so QuickBooks did a great job for us, but it was hard and challenging to work with QuickBooks at the end there, especially as we were, had to remote in or use the VPN to log in from at home, and it made QuickBooks even, extra slow for the team. And so that was a challenge, and it was nice to switch to something that was cloud-based and, a lot more flexible, and you could just access from a web browser and with a login and do things like journal entries that, you can do the journal entries for 2 sets of books all at once, if it's an intercompany transaction, as opposed to having to go into one set of books and do a transaction and then another set of books. We had just outgrown QuickBooks, and that was something that, our CEO and CFO joke that it's like we got the keys to a new sports car, and we really don't know, how to drive it yet, but we're learning. So.
Yeah, it's hard to know when you've outgrown your accounting system, but it's important to make the switch when it becomes painful to use the the original system.
Absolutely.
It's nice to be cloud-based for sure. It's much more flexible, especially in this remote work environment. And lastly, on a more personal note, what is something that you'd like to accomplish either professionally or personally, or maybe both, in 2021?
Yeah. Professionally, within my role here at Caliber, it's just continuing to grow and strengthen the team, looking to build a team culture, as difficult as it is to do in a remote work environment. We've had some new people start, and they're in the office a bit, and there's not that many other people in the office. So trying to, strengthen those bonds and find ways to keep the team connected, united, and working together in the remote environment is one big focus. I mentioned Sage, learning to leverage that system for better real-time reporting and decision-making, reporting across different departments within the organization. mean, all of that is something I think professionally, just, expanding my capabilities and leading the team. And I've got a lot of learning to do on the technical side as well, in the midst of everything else, and learning how to use Sage myself. So that's a lot. On the personal side, we've got some home renovation projects going. I think that's probably not unique to us, but we spend more time at home, and all of a sudden all these projects pop up. And so I've been moving some dirt in my backyard, and, putting some artificial grass in, and things like that are kind of fun projects that'll keep me busy on the weekends. But when things open back up, I run a half marathon every year, Mesa half marathon. And it would have happened a couple weeks ago. It was postponed for COVID for obvious reasons, but hoping to see that open up maybe here shortly and get a race. And I need to, get back to training a little bit more. So something fun on the personal side.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm always so impressed by people that can run that sort of distance.
Well, I don't do it that fast, but this will be my 9th time when it happens. So doing that same race. So it's just kind of a fun thing to keep me motivated. And really, I think just a exercise goal to have every year. I run it with my wife, with a couple of my sisters, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, a lot of different people, and some friends, coworkers too, who've run it over the years. So it's been kind of fun just to have that. And if anybody wants to run it with me that's listening to this, I'm happy to have you join when that opens back up.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, to races and 10Ks and 5Ks being a thing again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coulson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you, Megan. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, I've enjoyed speaking with you and hearing about your experience. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about what you've learned with us. I wish you and Caliber the best this year and in the future. To all of our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as well. Please tune in next week. And until then, take care of yourselves.
If you're ready to boost efficiency and streamline your accounting processes at significant cost savings, it's time to talk with Personiv. Their people-powered solutions have transformed the delivery of back-office tasks and general accounting functions for decades, partnering with clients to provide everything from accounts payable to payroll services. See what Personiv can do for you by visiting personiv.com.
You've been listening to CFO Weekly, presented by Personiv. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to hear all of our episodes. Want to learn more? Check out personiv.com. Thanks for listening.